Joe Biden was on Seth Meyers last night. There were protests in 30 Rock, I believe.
Yep. Which is incredible because he did not publicly disclose. It was supposedly a surprise appearance.
And there were dozens of people, I think, who were arrested in protesting Biden's visit there. And here is Joe Biden on Seth Meyers' show. And, you see commentators going like, who's advising him to say this?
Right. Nobody. So you're about to see, he restates the same thing that we've heard about how he's a Zionist. Okay. He doesn't need to say this. If Obama were president right now, I guarantee you he would not be taking this posture. We know this from the substance of it. We know that he was more adversarial towards Netanyahu. We know that he went on frickin' Pod Save America in November or October and called it an occupation. Biden doesn't even call it an occupation, which is factually the case. He takes this tactic, which is like extremely ideological, and repeats what he seemingly has been saying since he met Golda Meir in 1973, and he pretends like this, or not doesn't pretend, this made a huge impact on him, and he hasn't updated the software since that point. Seth Meyers' question is extremely mild. He doesn't follow up at all, but I'm glad he asked it, and this is where Biden's at.
I want to ask about the situation right now in the Middle East. You have forcefully spoken about the horrible events of October 7th and how Hamas is a continuing threat to the safety of the people who live in Israel. You've been trying to negotiate the release of the hostages. At the same time, you've said that the response in Gaza is too much and that the loss of an innocent life in Gaza is just as horrible as the loss of an innocent life in Israel. And yet there have been calls for an immediate ceasefire. You have not supported those calls. Again, you seem like an optimistic person.
Pause it for 1 second. I just also want to reiterate, it's not just a question of not supporting calls. The United States has actively stopped the UN has vetoed now three resolutions calling for ceasefire. 3 times.
You have not supported those calls. Again, you seem like an optimistic person. You believe maybe there's a future for a 2-state solution, but from where I'm sitting, it does seem like there doesn't seem to be any appetite for that right now. Do you see because again, we see every day we see these horrible images out of Gaza. And is there a path forward? Is there a safe future for the people who live there?
There is a path forward with difficulty, but here's the path forward. Look, first of all, the hostages being held must be released. And if we've got at least a principle agreement, there'll be a ceasefire while that takes place. Ramadan's coming up, and there's been an agreement by the Israelis that they would not engage in activities during Ramadan as well, in order to give us time to get all the hostages out. That gives us time to begin to move in directions that a lot of Arab countries are prepared to move in. For example, Saudi Arabia is ready to recognize Israel. Jordan, Egypt, there's 6 other states. I've been working with Qatar.
We need to pause it for a sec. So notice how Palestinian self-determination isn't even...
Well, he hasn't even said the word Gaza or Palestine.
No.
Or Palestinians.
So why did Hamas feel that they wanted to engage in this attack? In part, we understand it's because of the Abraham Accords, because the Trump administration thought it was a good idea to move forward by going and trying to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia, a major country in the Middle East, without the participation of the Palestinian people and their representatives. Biden is continuing with this, a Trump administration policy that has contributed to inflaming tensions when he mentions all of these Arab nations that are set to recognize Israel, basically forced to under the weight of U.S. imperialism and power. He hasn't mentioned Gaza once yet at this point. So I just want, when we talk about normalization in that way, these are the conditions that also created the violence on October 7th that happened to Israel.
Egypt, there's 6 other states. I've been working with Qatar. And the bottom line is that I think the only way Israel ultimately survives, and I make no bones about it, and I get criticized for having said a long time ago, you need not be a Jew to be a Zionist. I'm a Zionist. Were there no Israel, there's not a Jew in the world to be safe. But here's the deal. they also have to take advantage of an opportunity to have peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians who are being used as pawns by Hamas. And so there's a process underway that I think if we get that temporary ceasefire, we're going to be able to move in a direction where we can change the dynamic and not have a two-state solution immediately, but a process to get to a two-state solution, a process to guarantee Israel's security and the independence of the Palestinians, but without them being able to, for example, invite in, another country to provide their defenses. There's ways to do this, and I don't have time to go into it now, and in the meantime, there are too many innocent people that are being killed. And
by Israel.
Israel has slowed down the attacks in Rafah. They have to, and they've made a commitment to me. They're going to see to it that there's ability to evacuate significant portions of Rafah.
All right, pause. I'm sorry. I know we're near the end, but we have to note what he's saying there. First of all, he's not ruling out an attack on Rafah. He's not ruling out an attack on the big, the concentrated refugee camp that is Rafah. Biden is not ruling that out. I just want to emphasize that.
He seems to be saying it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Condition.
It's going to happen eventually. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second thing he said there? I totally blanked on it. The evacuation. That's when he's talking about. So that is a recognition that he's going to support the ethnic cleansing of Gaza in this way, because what does evacuation mean? That likely means going into the Sinai.
I mean, I don't know if Egypt will do that, but beyond which, I would also say, talking about a process for a two-state solution, you just had a vote in the Knesset basically rejecting anything like that. I mean, so this is all it's fantasy. It's just it's cover. Just continuing. Let's
down the attacks in Rafah. They have to, and they've made a commitment to me. They're going to see to it that there's ability to evacuate significant portions of Rafah before they go and take out the remainder of Hamas. But it's a process. And look, Israel has had the overwhelming support of the vast majority of nations. If it keeps this up without this incredibly conservative government they have, and Ben-Gvir and others, I've known every major foreign policy leader in Israel since Golda Meir.
Ding dong.
They're going to lose support from around the world. And that is not in Israel's interest.
They lost support.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with that, because they are really horrifying scenes. And,
all right, that's how Seth got that interview. He's not going to follow
They're
up.
pariah.
Well,
we support them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not expecting much of the late night.
He's a
host.
late night.
He
comedy
actually
host.
seems like him and Colbert are kind of decent people, but like yeah, it's a fantasy. I wish there would be one person, and honestly, like somebody at one of these State Department briefings as well, who asked the question, okay, so you're saying a two-state solution is your stated goal. The leader of Israel and everybody in the wartime cabinet is basically voicing incredible opposition to that and saying publicly that Netanyahu says his post-war plan does not include a Palestinian state. It's indefinite occupation of Gaza. Then the question is, how can you say that you support multiculturalism and that you support all these racialized ideals, or multiracial ideals, and that you're against racism as the Democratic Party, and you still support segregation in the Middle East by religion and by race? Because that's what a two-state solution actually means. Let's be real here. And Israel is a pariah internationally. The only reason that Israel is still doing this is because of the diplomatic cover and arms that the United States provides. If you talk to anybody in the rest of the world who's not in Germany or the UK, or a Western state, the perception of Israel is that it's a pariah state that is basically functioning as a part of U.S. military interests in the region, and is totally out of control. So they've lost not just the rest of the world, but they've lost young people in this country forever. My generation will never, ever be supportive of Israel in the same way that previous generations were. And so the fact that Pelosi thought she was so slick last week saying, Netanyahu's a bad guy. That's what they think that their new tactic is. They're so behind the times with that. It's got to be much stronger than just condemning the big bad at the top, because this is so structural. And in the end, they don't have a real interest in changing things.